Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. ನಲಿಯುತ್ತ ಸಾಗುವ ನಿರ್ಮಲ ನದಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರ ಪಾವನತೆ ಫಲಿಸಿಹುದೋ. ನಲಿಯುತ್ತ ಸಾಗುವ ನಿರ್ಮಲ ನದಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರ ಪಾವನತೆ ಫಲಿಸಿಹುದೋ. ಉಲಿಯುವ ಹಕ್ಕಿಯ ಉದಾರ ದನಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರ ಮಧುಕಂಠ ಸುಳಿಯುವುದೋ. ಯಾರ ಮಧುಕಂಠ ಸುಳಿಯುವುದೋ. ಅರಳಿದ ಮಾವಿನ ಅನಂತ ಸಿರಿಯಲಿ ಯಾರ ಕಾರುಣ್ಯ ಮೆರೆಯುವುದೋ. ಯಾರ ಕಾರುಣ್ಯ ಮೆರೆಯುವುದೋ. ಆತ್ಮರೂಪಿ ಆ ರಮಣನ ವೈಭವ. ಆತ್ಮರೂಪಿ ಆ ರಮಣನ ವೈಭವ ತೋರುವ ರೀತಿಗೆ ಕೊನೆಯುವುದೋ. ತೋರುವ ರೀತಿಗೆ ಕೊನೆಯುವುದೋ. ತೋರುವ ರೀತಿಗೆ ಕೊನೆಯುವುದೋ. ಅರುಣಾಚಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವತರಿಸಿದವರ ಕರುಣಾ ನಿಲಯನ ಹಾಡುವೆನು. ಮರುಳು ಮಾನವನ ಮುಸುಕಿದ ಮಾಯೆಯ ಇರುಳ ಕಳೆಯೆಂದು ಬೇಡುವೆನು. ಅರುಣಾಚಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವತರಿಸಿದವರ ಕರುಣಾ ನಿಲಯನ ಹಾಡುವೆನು. When Vaniji suggested this topic, challenges faced by Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, I first wondered about it. I felt a bit challenged to speak about it. And then I said, all right, it's something different. Looks like Bhagavan is giving the topic because it came from Vaniji. And let us see in what way Bhagavan guides the unfolding of meditations on this subject. So who is Ramana? To know what challenges Ramana faced, we must first know who Ramana is. And as I just now sang, Ganapati Muni says Ramana is Atma Rupa. He is the embodiment of the self. And his glory, his beauty, his voice, his teachings are being sung of, are being praised, are being shared by every part of nature. Naliyuta saguva nirmala nadiyali yara karunya mereyuvudo. The rivers are expressions of his manifestations of his compassion, his grace. His voice is the sweetness, the melody of all the birds that sing, all voices. In Natya Shastra, in the dance, in the Abhinaya Darpana, as Ujjwal often tells us, there is a shloka, Angikam bhuvanam yasya vachikam sarvavangmayam aharyam chandra taradi tam namas satvikam shivam, whose body is the entire universe. So everything is an expression of his glory, says Ganapati Muni. And Atmarupiya Ramanana Vaibhava Toruva Ritige Koneihudo. Is there any end to the way in which we can look at his glory? So today we are looking at his glory in a different way. And that is by wondering what are the challenges he faced. And as I said, for that we need to know who he is. And Muni says he is the embodiment of the self. What does Bhagavan say? Bhagavan says that he is the self. Who is Arunachala Ramana? One of the devotees wrote a poem in Malayalam and gave it to him. And in that he asked him, who are you, Ramana? Who are you? Are you Hari? Are you Shiva? That is the Yativara. Are you Vararuchi? Are you Subramanya? Who are you? And Bhagavan answered, since it was a verse given to him, he completed it in verse form as an answer, which he has himself translated into Tamil. Ariyadi itarajeeva radahavadi jaguhayil Arivairami Paramatman Arunachala Ramanan. There he calls himself, first of all, Arunachala Ramana. And he says, Arunachala Ramana is that consciousness which is sporting in the hearts of all beings, beginning from Hari. Beginning from Hari. So he is that consciousness. And again, Sadhu Om Swami also says, Yuga kevam me kalpakom me inta divya shakti manuja rupa taluta iliya bahudu dharege. So what is this consciousness? Is this, surely Ramana is that consciousness, Arunachala is that consciousness, because when referring to Arunachala, Bhagavan says, oh Arunachala, you are Sudhaya Sharadiye Gambhiryada Siriye Parama Atmane Arunachala, you are the self. And so Arunachala Ramana is also the self. But we see him, we see a form, and we address him with a name, a sweet name, Ramana. And we say Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, a name by which Ganapati Muni first addressed him and declared to the whole world, this is the name by which you can know him. Ganapati Muni, when he came to Bhagavan, surrendered to his feet, and then he found his answer, and then he said so. So we have a form and we have a name. The self, we know, is beyond name and form. Bhagavan says in his 40 verses on reality, he says, Deho na janati sato na janma. Okay, he says the body is insentient. It doesn't say I, it doesn't say anything. It cannot say anything. It is jada. Vigraha indriya prana dhitamaha nahameka sattat jadam, he says in Upadesha Sara. So it is jada. And then what of the self? Sato na janma. The self is unborn. It is never born. So Ramana, the self, is never born. He is immortal. He has no death, no birth. So what is that Divya Shakti? It is the Shakti of Arunachala. Yuga ke umme kalpa kumme inta Divya Shakti. What is that Divya Shakti? It has come, says Brahma Vishnu Tiliyalilla Avanarindu. They did not know, they could not find the beginning or end of this column of light, of awareness, of consciousness, which is Arunachala. But that Shakti has taken a form. It has taken a form and allowed us to identify that Shakti with the form called Ramana. It has taken a form. It has taken a form and appeared in the womb of Alagamma. It has decided to manifest in the womb of Alagamma. So the first challenge, if there is a challenge. Now, is there a challenge for the self? There cannot be any challenge for the self. Because what is a challenge? What is a challenge? A challenge is an obstacle or a difficulty faced in attaining some goal. Now, this may be a goal. The attaining may be a goal that we are seeking, something which we have to get afresh. Or the goal may be something we need to get rid of. Pain, sorrow, anger, some other thing within me, something outside, which I want to get rid of, which I want to see the end of. And something else which I want to see the beginning of, which I want to attain. It is a state to be attained. There is a process in the seeking of some object, some goal, and during the process of seeking the goal, difficulties are faced, and they are called challenges. So, can the self have any challenge? First of all, it is not born. There is no birth. Najayato mriyato va kada chinnayam says Bhagavan Sri Krishna in the Gita, Najayato, it is not born, it is never born. If it is not born and it is undivided, it is all encompassing, it is infinite, there is nothing apart from it. It is ever full. What is it to seek? What is there for it to seek? When there is nothing for it to seek, how can it have any challenge? It cannot have any challenge. The self cannot have any challenge. But as I said, we are seeing the manifest Ramana who came into the womb of Alagamma, who manifested in the womb of Alagamma, making her whole body burn as if it was on fire. And that fire could be assuaged only by drinking the juice of Vilva leaves, which are very, very dear to Shiva. So what happens? This Atma Shakti has become manifest in the womb of Alagamma. That itself is a great challenge. How does the infinite limit itself to the finite? How does the timeless limit itself to time? This must have been the first challenge. And how does Ramana face this challenge? Is a mystery. We don't have answers for it. In the sense that how did the unmanifest become manifest? This is the question which is called the Maya. In Shankara Vedanta, it is called Maya. It is inexplicable. Maya means it is inexplicable. How that happened is inexplicable. But the great ones never go into how or why did it happen. In Vedanta, those questions are not encouraged. What is encouraged is, what can I do about it? Okay, there's something has happened. I am now finding that I am limited apparently to a body, to a name and form. My true nature may not be that, but I am finding myself engaged in this. So what do I do? So what did Ramana do? The manifest self, manifest in the womb of Alagamma. Why so manifest? For a purpose. Otherwise, why manifestation? Why did he come? Yuga kevam me kalpakom me intha divya shakti manujarupa taluta iliyabahudu dharege ಎದುರು ನೋಡಲಿಲ್ಲ ಯಾರು ಇವನು ಬರುವನೆಂದು ಆದರೂ ಬಂದ ನಮ್ಮ ಜೀವ ಉತ್ಥಾನಕ್ಕೆಂದು ಏನು ಅದ್ಭುತ ಎಂತ ಪವಾಡ ರಮಣ ಯೋಗಿ ನಮ್ಮೆದುರು ನಿಂತನು ನೋಡ ಶಾಂತಿ ರೂಪ ದಿವ್ಯ ದೀಪ ಬಂದಿಹ ನೋಡ. So there was a purpose. Vishwanatha Swami says in his 108 names to Bhagavan, Karanodbhavaya Namaha, born with a purpose. And he also explains what is that purpose. Jagat Hitavataraya Namaha, born for the good of the universe, born for the good of the world. Sadhuam Swami also says, he says, Sak Akhila Jagave ಸುಖವ ಪಡೆಯೇ ಅರಿವ ಹಾದಿ ಹಿಡಿಯೇ ಹೊರಗಣ ಕತ್ತಲೆಯ ಕಳೆಯೇ ರಮಣ ಗುರುವ ರೂಪದಲ್ಲಿ ಜ್ಞಾನಗಿರಿಯೇ ನಡೆದು ಬಹುದ ಕಂಡೆ ಅರುಣಾಚಲ ಶಿವ ಜ್ಞಾನಗಿರಿಯೇ ನಡೆದು ಬಹುದ ಕಂಡೆ. So Arunachala, that hill which the great gods, if you take the great gods to be the supreme mind, the supreme intellect, the best of minds, the best of intellects, cannot comprehend, then how does one attain to it? Out of great compassion, that light took first the form of the hill, it is said, so that we can see and we can touch and we can walk on and walk around and sing the glory of and try to imbibe that state. And many, from the ages of the Rig Veda to Ramana Maharshi says, Sri Ramana Natarajan, the founder, president of Ramana Maharshi Centre for Learning, he writes that from Rig Veda to Ramana Maharshi, Arunachala's glory has been shining. Yet, there was a gap. Great sages in Tamil literature, it says Jnana Tapodanarai Vavendrarekkum Malai Annamalai. Arunachala, known as Annamalai, it's famed for just pulling irresistibly to itself those who are yearning for self-knowledge, those who are doing their penance for self-knowledge, it draws to itself. Yet, we find that there is a gap where there were not many famous saints or sages for a few centuries before the appearance of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. So, it is decided by Arunachala. Now, the next level of manifestation has to happen. I have to walk on this earth as a human being. And therefore, the Shiva Tattva came into the womb of Alagamma. And the womb is described, the life in the womb is described as a great challenge by our Shastras. It is described so in order to deter us from getting further attached to anything whatsoever. Many great ones describe that it is like life in hell because it is so hot. You are imprisoned anyway. It is an imprisonment in a narrow space. It is so hot, and all around there is blood and pus and waste, everything around. That is what is the life in the womb. And one is upside down. Okay. The mother is standing, one has to be upside down. Afterwards, maybe the fetus will start moving and it will turn until that point. So there is absolutely no control. If we think we are in control now after being born, that's a so totally different subject and a topic. But if we feel we have freedom, at that time we don't have any freedom whatsoever. So that is the Garbhavasa. And in that Garbhavasa, what did Ramana do? How did he face that challenge? Through the Arunachala Smarana. He says, Arivar Giriyana Martarumamma Adisayam Idan Sayal Arivaridarkum Arivar Sirvayadadu Mudal Arunachala Miga Peridana Arivinilanga Arunagiri Ninti Hudu Jadadariti ತಿಳಿಯರಾರು ಅದರ ಕಾರ್ಯನೀತಿ ಬಾಲ್ಯದಿಂದಲೇ ಎನ್ನ ಮನಸ್ಸಿನೊಳಗೆ ಹೊಳೆಯುತ್ತಲೇ ಇತ್ತೆನ್ನ ಪ್ರಜ್ಞೆಯೊಳಗೆ. In the Kannada translation, it is translated as ಬಾಲ್ಯದಿಂದಲೇ. In Tamil, he says, Arivar Siruvayadu. Ever since that age of mine, when there was no knowledge of anything whatsoever. No knowledge of anything whatsoever. And so, in recent times, devotees have started intuiting that means right from the moment of conception. Because even after the fetus starts growing a bit in the womb, there is knowledge. The senses start developing, sense experiences start developing. So, if Bhagavan says, Arivaru Sirivayadu, what was happening? Arunachala, Holayuttale Yittenna Pragnayolage. The name Arunachala, 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 Arunachala was constantly shining, reverberating in his heart. My friend Dr. Kalarani, while narrating an incident about Manika Vachakar, she says Manika Vachakar was a great devotee, Tamil Saivite devotee, and the story goes that he was a minister in the Pandyan king's court. He was assigned the task of buying some horses. He was given a lot of money for that. On the way, he was captivated and captured literally by Shiva, who was waiting for him in the form of a guru at Perunturai. And he completely lost sight of his task. And not only did he lose sight of his task, he spent all the money in building a temple for Shiva over there. Now the king, of course, got to know and put him into prison and had him tortured. It is said he was put into a lime kiln, burning inferno, literally. He was put into that. And he sings of Shiva in that. And he says, a beautiful, cool breeze is wafting. There are cool ponds all around me with lotuses blossoming and bees humming and coming to drink the nectar from these lotuses. This is what he says. How was his experience that? Because he was in the thought of Shiva, which is most cooling. In Akshara Manamalai, another composition, Bhagavan Ramana says, Chittam Kulira, for my thought, for my mind, my fevered mind to become cool. You touch it with your hand of grace. So that experience of Shiva was held on to by Ramana. And then he was born. On the 30th of December 1879, he was born as the second son of Sundaramayyar and Alagamma. And he had a sweet childhood. They were a happy couple, a good couple, a pious couple, and a loving couple. Loving one and all. And so Ramana also grew up in that atmosphere. And what was the external challenge, if one can say, the first challenge that he faced as a young boy? Kutik. He took his father who was a lawyer, took him some what he thought was old papers, and he made kites or paper boats out of them, whatever the case may be. He let them fly, let them float away, and he got severely scolded. He was a boy of 4 or 5, got severely scolded. So that's a challenge. So what did he do? He disappeared from home, but when they searched, they found him behind the idol of Sahayamba, the goddess of Tiruchuri, the consort of Bhuminatheshwara in the Shiva temple there. He was sitting quietly and meditating. He had quietly gone into himself. He had gone into quietness in the presence of Sahayamba. He had taken refuge in her. So Vishwanatha Swami says, Sahayamba, Sahayavate Namaha. He took refuge in the mother, in the divine mother. For he says in another composition of his, Neene tai tande, Neene bandhu balaga, O Arunachala, O Parashivane, Jananavayittu Sakidavane. You gave birth to me. You gave birth to me. You are my mother. You are my father. So he went to the divine mother. And he tells, So his life, why are we looking at the challenges faced by Ramana? To understand how we need to face those challenges when they come to us. Because that's the purpose of his birth. That's the purpose of the primary challenge which he took on, the challenge of being manifest. So that's what he did. And then there was another. He was a boy of 12. Sundaramayar passed away. So what did this young boy do? Everyone around was crying. But Ramana went into, he investigated, he went into enquiry about the truth. He inquired. He says, my father, he thought, my father is just lying as if asleep, but everyone is weeping first. There is no difference in him between his being asleep and this position of his. But everyone is weeping. Then he saw that people carried him to the cremation grounds and burnt him, burnt the body. Then he thought, if that body were to have been my father, it would have protested and said, don't burn me. It couldn't have even withstood the burning, the flames, the heat. How would it have withstood it? It couldn't have. It didn't protest, it accepted it. So that was not my father. And my relatives wouldn't have burnt him down. If that was my father, why would they have burnt him down? Why would they? They love him as much as I love him. So that which was my father has left the body. My father's eye has left his body. And he didn't completely stop there. He thought, my eye is still in my body. He recognized at one level that the eye and the body are not the same, they are apart. The eye is apart from the body. As a boy of 12, when he faced that challenge, then he had to go to Madurai, he had to study. Various things happened. And he faced the next challenge, the next encounter with death. Because it's a big challenge. It came when he was a boy of 16. In fact, it's the biggest challenge that anybody has to face, is the facing death, facing the fear of death. Every challenge for us is only fear. Fear. We're afraid of a consequence. We're afraid of not attaining a consequence. Fear. Fear and fear alone is the challenge. And the highest, the biggest fear is the fear of death. It manifests for us not usually when we are young. Usually as we grow older, certainly, because we will be seeing the death of near and dear ones, and we will be seeing sometimes their illnesses, which make us worried or which make us anxious. So fear of death can manifest in that form. And as one grows even older, then fear of one's own death. It may not be conscious, because very often we are not conscious of why we feel something. We are not conscious of why we are doing something. We go through life in a habitual manner without wondering deeply about most of the things. Why? Why do I want something? Why do I not want something? We don't know for the most part. We don't bother. We are too much concerned with the flow. We just get carried away with it. But here, this young boy of 16, he was suddenly faced with with an intense fear of death. So intense that he felt at that moment there was no escaping it. There was no escaping it. Normal reactions would be to go to a friend at least, to go to an elder, to run to a doctor, to try to catch hold of something externally. But Bhagavan says, I felt that there was no escaping it, and the fear of death drove my mind inwards. He decided that as there was no escaping it, he had to face it. He had to face that challenge. And how to face the challenge of death other than by dying? So he lay down as if he was dead, held his limbs stiff, held his breath, and then he asked himself, okay, now this body is dead. And in a moment, in a flash, he says he could visualize that it is carried, because he has seen it happen for his father. He could visualize it's being carried to the cremation grounds and burnt and reduced to ashes. Boy of 16. He had seen it all happen in that moment. But then, because of the intensity, because it was not mere imagination, but it was intensely and vividly being lived by him, he could recognize that this entire process, who is witness to it? I know, I am aware of my being. Throughout this process, and the body had become stiff, the breath was not moving, there was no word being spoken, nothing, there was no activity in that young Ramana called Venkatraman. There was no activity. And yet, there was this eye shining. Eye. Arunachala revealed itself, that Arunachala, which was shining within him, revealed itself as I. That Aham Spurana, which he says never left him after that point. Balakanagire kalana nodi chalada manava bandhana madi halavu janmada bhrantiyanigi kalana leelaya ನೀಗೆಲಿದೆ ಯೋಗಿ ರಮಣ ಪರಮ ಗುರುವೇ ಯೋಗಿ ರಮಣ ಪರಮ ಗುರುವೇ. At that moment, he became that great yogi who had conquered death. Kalana leelaya ನೀ ಗೆಲಿದೆ. The purpose for which the timeless took on the time, the limitations, apparent limitations of time, in order to reveal that time is not. Time is not. Time is a myth. And that he did. Because he did that without any previous knowledge of any scripture. There was no Veda, Vedanta, anything which he had studied. He did not know the word Brahman. He did not know the word Atman. He had intuited that there was something apart from the body when his father died, but he did not say that he had further gone into it. And at that moment, he knew it without doubt as direct experience, aparokshanubhuti, sakshat. Bhagavan says, aham ahamiti, sakshat atmarupena bhati. In the heart cave, hridaya kuhara madhye, kevalam brahma matram, aham ahamiti, sakshat atmarupena bhati. That he came to know. And he says, thereafter, it was just the undercurrent. It was like the Shruti to music. Any other note may come and go, but this continued unbroken, continued unbroken through all his experiences. And while we are talking about his facing death, let us just shift to another incident, another time when he faced death. That time was when he was living in Tortoise Rock. He and some devotees had gone to Pachayaman temple down on the base of the hill, and then again they were returning to the cave on the hill, Virupaksha cave, when suddenly he actually had the physical experience of death. If as a boy of 16 he just lived it through a vivid dramatization, at that point he says a white curtain covered everything. Slowly everything was covered, but he was aware that the devotees were crying, they were weeping, and his body had gone blue, breath had stopped. But he says the current of I was continuing, and suddenly somehow he felt from the heart, spiritual heart center, a wave of energy just getting to his head, and from there to the whole body. And he revived. But then this this aham spurana was all that he held throughout his life from that point onwards. So all challenges, if there were challenges earlier, they were faced by holding to the Arunachala Nama, the Arunachala Spurana. And then that became the Aham Spurana. The Aham Spurana, the Aham Maham Niti Sakshat. What happened thereafter? There were many challenges if one sees it from our perspective. The journey of Ramana from Madurai to Tiruvannamalai is in itself an epic. He says he didn't know where exactly was Arunachala, but he felt the call of Arunachala when his brother scolded him for being totally indifferent to his studies, for being all the time lost in meditation, lost as he was in the bliss of the self ever thereafter. And somehow he felt the call of Arunachala. Arunachala provided him with money. His brother said, take money to pay my college fees. And this boy, he saw an old atlas, some nearby place, 3 rupees. He kept 3 rupees with himself, left the remaining, wrote a note saying, don't spend any money on this. This is going on a good enterprise. Left home. He could have bought a ticket to Tiruvannamalai with the 3 rupees, but he was so lost in the thought of Arunachala, if there was a thought, was so lost in the bliss of the self, that he only saw Tindivanam, which he wanted to buy a ticket to, and he bought it. Again, what happened? Divine providence guided him. One Maulvi on the train said, no, my young boy, you have to get out at Virupuram, you have to change the train. There. Then, remaining few annas, he could buy a ticket to the next station, because the hotel keeper said, don't give me the money for your afternoon meal. He went to the next station, Mambarapattu. Then he had no way of going. What did he do? He had no money with him. He had nothing with him. He had never been out of the house on his own. Never. So how does he go to Arunachala? He doesn't have an atlas. He doesn't have a GRS or GPRS, whatever we call it now, GPS, with which we can find it. He didn't even carry a map with him. He just walked along the railway track. He walked along the railway track. What made him do that? Because of the intensity of love for Arunachala, that was taking him. Later, his friend Rangan, when he came to him at Tiruvannamalai, close friend, classmate and friend Rangan, he says, Bhagavan, you didn't tell anybody you were leaving home, but you could have told me. We were such close friends. We were such close friends. We were so intimate. Why did you tell me? And Bhagavan said, Ranga, did I leave home like a traveler, packing his bags and going? I was just pulled there by some current. There was no volition. There was no volition. What was there? There was only love for Arunachala. After that, after that event, which we call as enlightenment, on the 17th of July, 1896, at Madurai, the town of Mother Meenakshi, which Vishwanatha Swami again in the Ashtotram says, Dwadashantas Mahasthala. It is said to be the highest chakra, the spiritual chakra, the 12th chakra, the place of Meenakshi. Having become enlightened, there was no thought, there was no motivation for anything, but Arunachala had the purpose. That Karana was Arunachala's Karana, that reason. And in another composition of Bhagavan, he says, Oh Arunachala, you made me born at Tiruchuri, take birth at Tiruchuri as the son of the pure Sundara and his wife Aragamma, in order that your glory may become widespread. Shivakkat chinmayam, Shedikkat tanmayam, Jagattirtunnu sempuruppu chemmale. So that is for the purpose of Arunachala. Arunachala drew him and he walked along the railway track. No food, he asked at Aryanamuru temple. The priest said no food here. He went to another temple. The priest said no food there, only for people working there. At Kirur temple, a drummer gave him some food, his own share of food. He took it and by habit, he had to wash his hands, feet, whatever it was. He asked for water. And before he could go to the place where water was, he fainted on the road. The food scattered there. And when he came to consciousness, he picked up that food scattered on the road and ate it. Later years, Bhagavan, Sri Ramana Maharshi, in the early years at Tiruvannamalai, he would walk on the streets and beg for alms. He would clap his hands before any one house, and whatever was food was given, he would eat it like that from his hands and wipe his hands on his head. Ganapati Muni says, Karatamarasena supatravata. His beautiful lotus hands were his vessel. And Bhagavan says, I felt like a king. I felt like an emperor when I went begging on the streets in that manner. In Guru Vachaka Kovai, there is a reference to how a king once was amazed by a sage who was totally in bliss, not owning anything of his own. Whereas he, as a king, owning the entire kingdom, was having so many anxieties, so many sorrows. In one of our plays, a queen, as a protagonist, asks Ramana, a queen who is suffering, asks Ramana, is it that you are ever in bliss because you have renounced everything? And Ramana gives an answer. He says, don't connect bliss with happiness, with anything external, with the presence or absence of anything external. If poverty were to disturb bliss, every beggar should be blissful. And if riches were to bestow bliss, every king or queen should be blissful. That is not the case. It has nothing to do with anything outside of you. It is your own true nature. It is your own true nature. So there is no challenge at all because the self is full and he was in that. But he lived a life in which we can see numberless challenges if we were to call them challenges. As I said, right from the journey to Tiruvannamalai. Then later, He pledged his earrings. He could have done that at the beginning, but Arunachala did not give him that thought. So he had walked, he had eaten the food on the ground, and then on Krishna Janmashtami day, he went into the house of a sweet couple, Mutta Krishna Bhagavata, and his wife, and there he got food and he pledged his earrings, and with the remaining money on the 1st of September 1896, he reached Arunachala, reported to Arunachaleshwara directly into the sanctum sanctorum. Father, I have come. That's it. Over. You asked me to come. I have come. Nothing further to be done. Nothing further for him to be done. But things happened and they were not easy. He threw away everything that he had. At that moment of absolute renunciation, he threw away everything which he had. So if he had even an iota of any thought about challenges to come, would he throw away everything which he had? Would he renounce everything which he had? Would he throw away the few naya paisa which were there with him? Even the sweets which he was carrying with him, given by that pious lady on the way? Everything was discarded and nothing was needed. There was no challenge. But there was food. There was food. Who would give him food? Food came. Bhagavan says later, when he is asked, what about food? He said, food was forthcoming. People would give. Some old, the first bhiksha was old food, old gruel in a rusted tin. Old, many days old food, rice with water, sour rice, it calls it, with a small dry pickle somewhere at the bottom. Food. The first bhiksha of Arunachala. The first bhiksha. What a bhiksha, he says. That was food. There were other devotees. He was in Patala Lingam. He went into the underground cave where his body was being eaten by vermin. Pus and blood was flowing out. Would that not be a challenge? He was oblivious of it at that time. He was carried out by some devotees. Food was given by some people, off and on. Some people came. They became his attendants, Uddandi Nayanar, Annamalai Thambiran, and later Palani Swami. Food was forthcoming, he says. But you see, he says, when there is no tenant, rent does not have to be paid. When there is nobody, there is a tenant here for every one of us. I think I am a tenant of this body. I think this is mine. Even if I don't think this is I think this is mine. This is my house. And I am here inside as a tenant. And so, when there is any problem with my house, it's as good as there has been a problem with me. It leaks. This house has 9 doorways through which it's constantly leaking, says again Manika Vachakar in Shivapuran. It's a very leaky house. But then there is no tenant. What of paying rent? Is what Bhagavan says. No concern at all about the body. And hardly, not good food. Sometimes only afterwards also when the devotees would go begging for alms. What food? They would get enough. Sometimes there was enough to make it very watery gruel, because it would always be shared equally by Ramana with whomsoever was there with him. Ever since he started staying along with people on the hill, Virupaksha cave, Skandashram, whatever would come would be distributed then and there. Nothing was kept for the morrow. So what were the challenges? Yes, physical health was a challenge. In Patala Lingam that happened. And of course, we know his last few years, the challenge of sarcoma, the dreaded sarcoma, which was so terrible, the disease, that every physician, every doctor, every surgeon who attended on him could not fail to be amazed that Bhagavan was smiling through all this, totally untouched. Was there no pain? There was pain. There was pain. If he was asked, he said, it's like 1,000 elephants trampling on that part. The, the BP was so low. I think the 80 which should be there. It was like 25, 27. But there was Bhagwan giving darshan to everybody. So what was that challenge for him? Why did he do all this? His body may appear to have been a challenge from our perspective, not from his. What was the challenge? There was only one purpose, right? If at all it was a purpose. It was not a conscious purpose, but there was a purpose. As we said, the purpose was Akhila Jagavu Sukhava Padaye. It was that everyone, the entire universe should be established in bliss. It was the purpose of being the Sadguru, not a conscious motivation, not that kind of a purpose. Muruganara Swami says that it is like a tree giving shade to every comer by nature, not by choice. By nature. Whoever goes under the tree, even a woodcutter who's going to cut down the tree, if he first sits under its shade, it will give the shade to the woodcutter. If he cuts off one branch and then comes and sits under the tree, the remaining branches, it will continue to give shade. It is its nature to give shade. So Ramana, whether robbers come and beat his thigh, he says, it's okay, take whatever is there. Then he tells everyone, we are sadhus. Let us not retaliate, let us not beat. If our teeth accidentally bite our tongue, we don't knock off our teeth. So all living beings, he was the Guru. And he is available as the Guru. That is his challenge, was to reveal that. To reveal it by remaining unwaveringly in such a firm manner in the self that no matter what anybody could ask him, the answer was always abide in the self. The answer was always the self is all enveloping. No matter at what time anybody could ask him a question. One lady asked him, Bhagavan, you say that there is only one consciousness. You mean to say you, me, my servant, all of us are one and the same? And Bhagavan said, in one consciousness, I, you, your servant, and the monkeys outside the window are all the same in one consciousness. And that lady was aghast. And she said, the monkeys also? They're not even human beings. To another person, he says, even the stone slab on which you are sitting is only that consciousness. Everything. He never wavers from that, never wavers from it. And it could be monkeys, it is said. Monkeys used to come and sit in his presence. By that overpowering silence, they would also get into the self. And if one monkey just moved this way, that way, then Bhagavan would say, Enna rajyam kolla poradhu? Which kingdom are you losing now? What kingdom are you going to gain by your movement, by your thought activity, by your physical activity? What kingdom are you going to get? The only kingdom to be got is the kingdom of the self. And that is already yours. Don't lose out on it. That's all. Don't lose out on it. He says. Therefore, there were many challenges. If we look at it, every moment of life of Bhagavan was a challenge from our perspective. As a boy of 12, he lost his father. As a boy of 16, he had to face death. He had to leave home and come. He after that had no property of his own, no source of food, no source of clothing. There was a time when he had a single kaupina, loin cloth, and that was torn. And what did he do? He secretly, when he went for his bath, he took out a thread from the same loin cloth at the edge of it. He made a needle from a thorn of a cactus plant and stitched his loin cloth, put it inside out and wore it. no clothes to wear. He who did not care for clothes, but wore them out of consideration for the humankind, that we cannot understand his state. We need that. We need him to be clothed. So he wore that loin cloth. He who is Digambara, who is clothed by the skies. So what were the challenges? Nothing. There was nothing at all. Where is the question of one challenge or other? He did not own a thing. He did not have food. He did not have clothing. He did not have a place to stay. If he stayed at Virupaksha cave, the owners of Virupaksha cave decided to levy a tax on the visitors. He walked out of the cave. He sat outside. No place. And yet, the whole universe was his. The king of kings, monarch of monarchs, to whom the entire world, and including the king of then Mysore, Krishnadeva Raya, Krishnadeva Vodayar, Krishna Rajendra Vodayar, he went to see him. The kings went to him. The kings were at his feet. So what was his purpose? To communicate that every living being, every one of us, is in that very same state. His challenge was to communicate it to us. To give us a path which could be as simple can be, and not simpler, as somebody said, as direct as a path can be. And he told us, Atmajnana yenito sulabha yenu saralavo. ಆತ್ಮವು ಅತಿ ದುರ್ಬಲನಿಗೂ ಸತ್ಯವಾದುದೋ ನೋಡೆ ಕೈಯಲ್ಲಿಯ ನೆಲ್ಲಿಕಾಯೆ ಮಿಥ್ಯವಾದುದೋ. A gooseberry in your palm is actually an illusion. It is difficult. It is difficult to understand. It is difficult to know that there is a hand. It is said by psychologists also that a child develops, first of all, a concrete body image with some time. It is first very fuzzy. Even the concept of a body is not very clear for the child. It is fuzzy. So it has to be developed, and that is what the parents help. The environment helps the child to develop a clear identity. And then after that, the child has to be told, ideno kannu, what are these? These are baby's eyes. This is a baby's nose. These are baby's hands. It has to be told. Then it has to be learnt. Then knowing something is my hand and something is kept on my hand, knowing that something, what that something is, knowing that that's a gooseberry, identifying it. So many challenges. Actually, every moment in our human life is a challenge, because we do not know whether this body is going to be functional the next moment. There are so many millions of processes happening in this body automatically by divine grace, because of which I am able to talk, because of which I am able to see, because of which I am able to know my hand. And any smallest thing goes wrong, it will all come to a standstill. Great challenge, but we are totally unaware of it. Totally unaware of it. In contrast, the self, ever attained, ever available, ever bliss, ever fullness, ever challenge free, available to us. And how do we reach it, we say? Our own self, our own true nature. But because of forgetting it, भूल कर आत्मा शरीर को जब सब कुछ ही माने, अगणित जन्म ही लेकर मानव आत्म तत्व ना जाने, संभ्रम निशि दिन फिरत भटकत सपनों की दुनिया में. He's actually wandering in the world of dreams. Bhatakat. He is wandering, says Ramana, wandering, lost in the kingdom, in the world of dreams. अंतकाल में जाग उठे. At the end, he wakes up by the grace. He wakes up by the method of getting back, by holding on, by recognizing that nothing else is worthwhile. The whole purpose. अंतकाल में जाग उठे और लगे आत्मगुण गाने. He starts singing the glory of the self, says Ramana. And when everyone starts singing the glory of the self, but everyone is abiding in the self, then the Guru's challenge is met. The Sadguru's challenge is met. The only challenge which he has, which he doesn't encounter as a challenge, because he is the very self. He is ever abiding in the self. Never different. Never any moment different. Never. So there is no challenge. But if we look at the challenge of the manifestation, then that challenge, which Ramana has taken on, a very, very big challenge, to liberate, to get every being back to its natural state. And to establish this, Ramana said there are no exceptions. No exceptions. He was asked by Ganapati Muni's wife, what about women? Bhagavan says no difference in jnana between men and women. And he established it by giving liberation to Mother Aragamma. He showed that the human bondages that we have are not challenges. He had nothing, but he could give his mother everything. He could do by his mother what all needed to be done, the only thing that needed to be done. He didn't promise her a home. He didn't promise her food. He said, I don't know, have any place. What can I promise? Let the divine destiny take you where it will. But he bestowed on her the highest state. He gave her the respect of standing by the side of, or as a support to his brother, Niranjanananda Swami, the younger brother who joined him in building that beautiful temple to Mother. And what he gave to Mother, he gave to cow Lakshmi as well. He gave to Jackie the dog as well. He gave to Valli the deer as well. He gave to an unknown, unnamed crow as well. And he made himself stood beside the mason, stood along with the mason and built samadhis for all of them to declare to every one of us, this state is yours, it is ours, it is everyone. If it belonged only to me, it would not be called reality, he says. And the way, because we are human beings, if we can surrender, if we can be full of love for him and for the self, as he was for Arunachala, there is no path that is required. But if our intellect is alive and kicking, if it asks questions, if it wonders why something is like this, if it wants something, if it does not want something, if it discriminates, and doesn't have the total acceptance that everything is divine, everything is by the divine force, if it does not have that surrender, then he says, there is a path. If your intellect is alive, question, find out who is that intellect, who is having these thoughts, who is having the discrimination, who am I? Who am I? Find out who you are. By the process of observing, yes. Recognizing that the body, I am witness to the body. I am witness to my mind is witness to the body. My senses are witness to the world. And if I do not have senses, there is no world for me. So the world is but the senses. If I do not have a mind, a thought, there is no sense experiences. The thoughts are my senses. And what are the thoughts powered by? They are powered by my sense of being I. I am Sarada, therefore all the thought worlds. And I am Sarada is the core of my feeling of existing as an individual. But this disappears in deep sleep. Nothing exists, and that is bliss. So what happens in that deep sleep? There is also ignorance, but without the ignorance, if I can question, who am I? Independent of all my experiences, independent of all my attributes, independent of all thought, free from thought, who am I? Free from all exercises, even of thinking. And if I am free from thought, then I am free even of being a witness to thought. Because when there is no thought, there is no witness of thought. Who am I? Who am I in that absolute essence? He says, get back, get back, get back, get back, and enjoy that kingdom. Enjoy that kingdom of bliss. Enjoy it, which is your own birthright. Forget about a birthright. It is your nature. It is you. It is you. It is you. Every moment it is you. It is available every moment to you. And when we turn back to it, he says, in that verse of his describing who is Ramana, he says, Arunachala Ramana is the self-consciousness shining in the hearts of all. And then he continues, every time he continues, everywhere he will give the method as well. Parivalula muraha nala paranarndida guhayarndu arivambidi tirava nijam arivayadu veliyam. With love, if you search, with loving inquiry, if you turn inwards, the true eye of knowledge, the vision of knowledge, that which sees the true knowledge, that eye of knowledge will be opened and you will see. And he says, then you are the emperor. You are the emperor of everything. Nothing in his Ashtakam, he says, nothing is going, nothing is coming. Nothing will disturb you anymore. You are the emperor. You are the king. To bestow that kingdom of ourselves to us. In great grace, he has come as Ramana. Prostrations, once again, to the self embodied as Ramana, to which we offer our prostrations until we believe we are embodied. And thereafter, to which continuous prostrations happen by abiding in that very state. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. My thanks to Meditation and Study Circle, to Vaniji and Vasudevji, to Vanima for giving me this subject, to new kind of subject to meditate upon. One more. Atma Rupiya Ramanana Vaibhava Torva Ritige Kone Hudo, for giving me this. And welcome to every one of you. Do be part of Ramana Maharshi Centre for Learning and activities in whichever way you would like to. You are most welcome, and do come to the Ramana Shrine as well in Bangalore. Thank you once again.